You're listening to the Bird Dog Babe podcast with my mom, Courtney Bastion.
But I think everyone's dog is also so different and their needs are so different. And so a lot of these over-the-counter kits that you buy they're expensive, and then you're still finding they don't have what you need. Everything's individually wrapped in little pieces of paper. And when you're working in an emergency, the last thing you want is 10 individually packaged pieces of gauze. You want things to, have a kit that you're familiar with that has lots of separate compartments so that you can keep everything that's clean and dry. I like mine to be bright. And my current kit, it doubles as a backpack, so that I can take that kit from my truck if I can't get something out of the field, and I can quickly and easily carry that, over my shoulder and get into the field. So I think that making your own tends to be less expensive for most people, and it's going to be more in line with the needs that you have for your dogs.
Hey bird dog babes, my name is Courtney Bastion and I am obsessed with all things bird dogs. And I'm here with you to share the stories, experiences, knowledge, and opinions from the women and a few guys in the industry that are killing it. I'm a Wisconsin girl living in a Montana world. I'm mom and 2 incredible kiddos, wife and occasional assistant to a pro gun dog trainer, traveling the U.S. talking about canine nutrition while hunting, breeding, and competing with my German wire hair pointers and Bracco Italianos. As someone who started hunting later in life because I wanted to give my dogs the opportunity to do what they were bred to do, I'm here to help inspire, educate, and connect women to get their bird dogs out in the field and experience a bond like no other. So pour yourself a glass of wine and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. This is the Bird Dog Babe podcast. Hey y'all, I hope everyone had a great week. Our Big Sky NAVHDA chapter held our first test of the year this past weekend. It was 4 days of tests, 3 of them being double tests. So a big shout out to all the judges and volunteers that helped. We have 1-week-old puppies here at home, but I was able to pop over there a couple times for a short visit. It was so great to be able to get together with the bird dog community and feel a slice of normal again. Also, shout out to my Patreon patrons who are pumping out $5 per month to help keep the lights on here in my closet to bring you these episodes once a week. Randy O'Neill and Melanie Wallace joined as patrons this past week. You are awesome. I have some pretty cool vinyl stickers to put on your vehicle, drink tumbler, dog crate, or just let your kids stick it on their shirt, wherever. They're heat resistant, weatherproof. You can put them through the dishwasher and basically throw it off a cliff and it'll survive. If you'd like one, submit a review of this podcast on whichever platform you're listening from. Send me a screenshot of it and your address and I'll get it in the mail. Because being a bird dog babe is pretty badass and you need a sticker. A reminder that if you're interested in attending our Women, Wine, and Wild Game Pheasants Forever Women on the Wing event presented by Waltons, that's a lot, that's being held at Excel Shooting Sports in Kalispell, Montana on August 15th, to get registered because there are limited spots available. This will be a chance to hunt over broke dogs from the NAVHDA organization, take your harvest to the bird cleaning station to learn how to properly clean a bird, get fit, and demo shotguns from the Cesar Guarini, Fab Arm, and Siren shotgun line, as well as enjoy some wine and some awesome raffle and auction items. Seriously, I'm so stoked about these items coming in from our sponsors, Purina, Prois, Onyx, Big Frig Coolers, Hunt to Eat, Gun Dog Supply, Dewberry, and there are still more coming in every day. We'll be discussing the launch of a Montana Women on the Wing chapter, and with that, we'll bring some fun, awesome opportunities in the future. So get registered before it fills up. My guest today is Dr. Meg Puchler of On Point Veterinary Services. There are very few veterinarians out there who truly focus on bird dogs, and even more so, those that are female. So I'm pretty stoked about having a vet on that's an actual bird dog babe. She's out there training and hunting and getting it done. Today, Dr. Meg is telling us the necessities to have in our first aid kit, both in the vehicle as well as what should be in your vest in case something should happen to your dog while in the field. She talks about the importance of preventative care and what we should be doing now before the hunt to decrease chance of problems. And she discusses the importance of having a good working relationship with your veterinarian so they can help better prepare you with advice and meds before your dog hits the field this fall. There's no need to go buy yourself one of those $500 pre-made first aid kits on the market. Dr. Meg shares all the info and items you'll need to make one yourself. Share this episode with your friends. It's one that is an absolute must listen. All right, now let's get after it. Thank you to sponsor Dakota 283, unparalleled protection for traveling to and from your favorite hunting spot. Dakota 283 kennels are a premium quality roto-mold with recessed handles on top for convenient and safe tie-down and makes it easy to lift up into the truck. I love the secure door frame with high security locks so I know my dogs are safe when I need to stop for fuel. An added bonus is the drain hole in the back, which makes cleaning a breeze when your dog has been run hard and put away wet. Head over to Dakota283.com and use promo code BirdDogBabe for a 10% discount. Thanks to sponsor Excel Shooting Sports, elite dealer of Cesar Guarini, Fab Arm, and Siren shotguns. Siren is the world's only full line of shotguns created for the female competitor, hunter, and shotgun enthusiast. Excel is one of only 4 demo centers west of the Mississippi. They give you the opportunity to actually try out a gun before you walk out the door with it. As an elite dealer for Cesar Guarini, Excel offers their customers unlimited pit stops of free service and tune-ups on all shotguns, a great way to have your gun in top condition for the upcoming hunting or target season. In addition, they're offering an exclusive deal to all of the Bird Dog Babe listeners for a free gun slip with each purchase, a $90 value. Hey, Dr. Meg, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
I'm excited to have you, and recently found out that you don't live too far from me. I'm finding this out with a lot of my awesome guests. So this is a bonus. You are living down in the Bitterroot.
Yes, yeah. So I don't live that far away from you guys. So I grew up in Montana, and we moved around quite a bit when I was younger, and somehow or some way, all of my family has ended up back in the Bitterroot and living here. We all moved back, and so it's nice being close to my parents, and my sister and her family live here, and all our collective hunting dogs.
That's awesome. Do your parents and your sister hunt as well?
They do. Yep. And definitely my father primarily is who got my sister and I both into hunting. He is very into conservation and ethical hunting and fair chase and definitely bird dogs. And so we were raised with bird dogs, and he was our hunter ed instructor once upon a time, and we both grew up to kind of love that lifestyle. And my sister has gone more so into big game hunting, and I drifted into just really loving animals and primarily bird dogs, and so I do the bird hunting half of it.
Very cool. What kind of bird dog breeds did you guys grow up with?
So growing up, we had golden retrievers, and we were blessed with 2 very long-lived golden retrievers. So that was pretty much our only dogs when we were growing up, because our one lived to be about 17 and a half, and the other one was about 16. Once I started hunting, I realized very quickly, for myself at least, I didn't actually enjoy running through the fields after retrievers and flushers, which there's a lot of running involved when you hunt those breeds. And we decided to get a setter when I was in probably late middle school, when our one golden was still alive. And so we started out our setter journey with a Gordon setter.
Very cool. So you started hunting at a pretty young age then. Was it right when you went through hunter safety?
It probably was, we were certainly going with my father long before that. My fondest memories of being young is being at something we called Antelope Camp, which we went with a couple other families, and we went to Eastern Montana for a week, and we had wall tents, and I spent a lot of time looking for dinosaur fossils. At the time, I thought I was going to be a paleontologist, and we would stay out there for, again, a good week, and just kind of enjoy being off the grid. And, those were probably our first big hunting trips. And then I started working with the dogs with my dad at a young age and going out on trips before, I could actually carry anything, and just kind of kept with it.
At what point did you go from wanting to be a paleontologist to a veterinarian?
I would say I'm probably a non-typical veterinarian, and I did not go straight through high school and then into undergrad and then into vet school. I kind of took my time, which for myself, I'm glad I did. I always wanted to work with animals, but I wasn't sure quite at what level. At one point, I wanted to write for National Geographic, and I was an English major, and then I decided I kind of wanted to be a wildlife biologist like my father had been. And then it was really about 4 years after undergrad. I had been working in veterinary industry and as a certified veterinary technician, and I decided, that I know a lot about this industry now, and it's time to go back and time to become a doctor. So that is what I did. And then I've been practicing now for about 8 years.
Very cool. And you've been, so you went to vet school in Oregon, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I graduated from Oregon State University, but was lucky enough to start some of my schooling abroad as well. So let me see a lot of different diseases and the resilience of dogs in third world countries and what they are capable of. And so it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
What did you find when you were in vet school? Kind of what direction did you take that you felt was your niche and what you really enjoyed?
I've always loved performance dogs. I think dogs with jobs are just the coolest. And I feel actually a lot of the diseases we see in dogs are secondary to the fact that they're not allowed to do the jobs that they were meant to do. And so be it from sled dogs to hunting dogs, and hunting dogs are definitely my soulmates. I knew that I wanted to be in a practice that was very dog heavy and canine performance focused. And I've kind of slowly been trying to move my career that way since I got out.
Nice. Did you have your hunting dogs with you through vet school?
I did. So at that point, I had a red setter, who I would say was my soul dog. I miss her dearly. She unfortunately didn't live as long as I would have loved for her to have been on the planet. But she was with me through my third year of veterinary school, my fourth year, because you do a lot of overnights. She actually got to come back to Montana and live with my parents while I was doing my fourth year. And then we reunited after that.
And you said after vet school, when we talked earlier, you've lived kind of all over Montana for a while?
I have. So growing up, we moved quite a bit. And then after veterinary school, I started practice at a 24/7 facility on the out of Billings, and then lived in Bozeman for a while, and then have, with every move, circled closer and closer to the rest of my family, and now have landed here. And then I currently am licensed in Alaska and Montana, and so I until recently, and COVID-19 had been splitting my time between Alaska and Montana in regards to practice.
So you said a little bit earlier about some diseases that are affecting dogs that aren't actually doing the job that they were bred to do. Can you dive into that a little bit about what that was?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think a lot of the things that we see that we write off as OCD type behaviors or anxiety. A lot of that stems from they afflict these dogs that are naturally active, tend to be young, and tend to be of the hunting variety. Labs are still one of the most popular breeds in the U.S. They usually are number one almost every year, though I think some of the oodles out there are starting to steal that number one slot. But we've taken these dogs that were bred very specifically to be active and prey driven, and then have forced them to live in tiny yards that are fenced in, and they don't get to have that exposure that really I think they need to have a full and happy life. And it's not to say you can't do that. I know many people who hunt with their Labradors and they live in small apartments. But I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're asking that of them, and we need to, really work hard to make sure these dogs are still tired. And so I think these animals that don't get that level of mental stimulation and activity are often these dogs that break down and they have lick granulomas where they're damaging themselves, and they have high anxiety levels. They also seem to be a little more prone to some inflammatory issues, simply because they're not allowed to, be what they're meant to be.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think even the homes, and this is something, so when we have a litter, we do make it a requirement that they go to a hunting home. But it's kind of a gray area because you can have a family that doesn't hunt, but they're out hiking or running or doing something active almost every day of the week with their dog, versus the hunting home, quote unquote, that goes out maybe 2 weekends a year.
Yep. I think for most of us, unfortunately, our hunting season does end up being just that, because we have full-time jobs, and we maybe take a week or two off if we're lucky, and now and then we can chase some birds on the weekends. But we're talking about a short season in general. And so I think the importance of activity level and that off-season training, having them have some birds to chase, things to smell. I think every walk with my dogs, they think they're hunting. They might take it a little more seriously when we're carrying our guns, but for them, they have a wonderful life where they can do that and get out there. And for them, the season never ends. It ends for us, but
yeah. No, I agree. And just the importance of conditioning as well, keeping them active and ready for hunting season. And that kind of gets into what our discussion is today of first aid and just preventing injury in the field. Before we get into that, though, I thought when you're up in Alaska practicing, do you ever get a chance to go hunting when you're up there?
So when I'm practicing up there, unfortunately, no, though my family did live there for about 4 years. And so we did get to chase ptarmigan, which was quite fun up there. And didn't get to do any of the sea ducks, but there are quite a few people out there with their Labradors that do quite a bit of work along the ocean there, which is, I think, fun and different for people. Yeah, the ptarmigan are certainly they're hard to get to, and one of the hardest birds to hunt for sure.
What are you hunting right now? Which bird species do you mainly hunt?
I'm primarily upland focused because I do run setters. And we have added recently to the family a dual purpose dog. My sister has an Italian Spinoni who is
nice.
Very young, and we are working with her. And so in theory, we may have a duck dog in the future here. And my one setter actually could very well be a duck dog during at least the warmer periods of the season. She loves to swim and loves to retrieve. But for me, I love pheasants. I really do. I think my girls actually like Sharpies and Huns a little bit better to hunt, though they like to hunt anything. And then certainly quail. We try to drift down to the Southwest at least once a year and chase some quail down there. All of the upland species we really try to get after.
Okay. And so the quail that are right there in your backyard that you're allowed to hunt year round, I think this is crazy.
Yes, so there are California quail that have become prolific in the Bitterroot. When I lived here when I was younger, I don't remember seeing them to the levels that they are. And so, yes, in theory, you can chase some California quails around. I have not done that personally with a gun. We have a lot of California quail in the yard, and my one setter points them for hours every day because they're at the bird feeder. But I certainly know there are some folks out there and running dogs. I think the one thing I would say for me as a veterinarian and from someone who also, once upon a time was going to be a wildlife biologist, I think all of us need to be mindful and careful about, when we're chasing birds and nesting seasons, because even if you're trying to chase these California quail, if you're bumping our native Sharpies and Huns who have had several very tough seasons in a row, when they're trying to nest, that can be difficult for them. That stress from bird dogs and from hunters, and so and just our local grouse species too. So I think we've got to be cognizant of that, and the young fawns and all those things that are out there and hiding. I do think there are some periods of the year that we do kind of need to sit back and let things grow up.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have English setters right now?
I do. I've got a red and white, and then a tricolor, and so they are cousins, and have just really developed nicely into pretty wonderful dogs.
Mm-hmm. Do you breed yourself?
I don't. I leave that to wonderful people like you. And, I find one puppy at a time is enough for me, usually to keep me entertained and busy. I think my magic number of dogs in a house is 2. I love having 2 dogs. I think
that sounds like bliss.
It is. It's great for hunting. They entertain each other. It's an easy number to work with. It's in theory, like people say about kids, you add the 3rd one and all of a sudden you're outnumbered.
Right. Yep. All right. So what I wanted to talk with you about today is first aid. And believe it or not, this is one of the most requested episodes that my listeners are begging me to have. So, what I specifically want to know is first aid kit in the truck. What should we have? And first aid kit or items that we should be carrying in our vest when we're out in the field. Because I know I personally have been, maybe 4 hours away from the truck at times. So if something happens out there, that's... what do we do in that scenario? So let's start with basic first aid kit. What all needs to come with?
Yeah. So, I think for in the truck, that is where I like to have a lot of bandaging supplies. I think that bandages are probably the number one thing that folks tend to go through rapidly. Especially sometimes they fall off, they get ruined, so you need more than you think. So I like to have the ability to always put on a 3-layer bandage, and I have an Instagram page where I have videos of how to apply a bandage. But bandage, you need some roll gauze. For dogs, I like having about 2-inch roll gauze. You can get that at any of your regular ag stores that have a kind of a pet section. That's probably the cheapest place to buy things as well, versus trying to buy bandaging supplies that are meant for people in your local stores. That's going to be way more expensive, and they're not going to function as nicely. So I like to have at least a couple rolls of the 2-inch roll gauze, and then I like to have some cling gauze, which is like a brown, very thin, tighter wrapping gauze of the same size, about a 2-inch again, in the same amount. And then I like to have several rolls of vet wrap. And same thing for me. I think it's easier working with the 2-inch than the really broad 3-inch styles that are out there. They just seem to be harder to wrap a paw with than to work with. So that, and then some Telfa squares, Telfa pads. So that makes up kind of the bottom of your bandage for if you have something that's actually oozing and bleeding. And then some white tape. And that's pretty much all you need for bandage supplies. Bandage scissors are very nice. Never try to remove a bandage with regular scissors. You will cause a new cut, guaranteed. Seen it lots of times. I like to have a good pair of cordless clippers, because trying to get hair away from wounds is just key. Trying to get things cleaned up. I like to have a thermometer, so I can check, temperatures, how things are going. If people are comfortable or interested in it, I think having a wound stapler is good for my more advanced hunters out there, or people with some medical background, because there's a lot of little scrapes that, if you clean them up appropriately, you probably can place a couple staples on your own and be okay.
So there are some sort of lacerations that should not be closed up, right?
Absolutely.
So what would that consist of? What is yes staple, no staple?
So things that you maybe would want to staple are going to be small lacerations. So things that are probably less than 2 inches in length.
Okay.
Things that when you just gently take your forefinger and your thumb, if you can close the edges of the wound, it comes together nicely. Those are things that are going to be easier to staple. If it's in a high motion area, so right over the wrist, right over an elbow or a knee, those are not things you want to staple because it's not going to work. And they really need to have stitches. Any sort of penetrating wound, we're talking about things that have gone into the tummy, those are not things you want to staple either. You need to be getting out of there. So, these are things that are full thickness, that the edges of the skin have spread apart, but are that are definitely not life-threatening, are fairly superficial and small in size. If you're trying to staple, and you're running out of staples, that's a wound that you need help for.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Other things I think that are important to have in the bag, I like to have every season, I get a new bottle of hydrogen peroxide that is fresh and hasn't been opened. I get a new bottle of alcohol. I get a new bottle of saline. So plain eye saline. And then I like to have a variety of syringes just for lavaging and washing out wounds, to make things a bit easier. And then for each dog, I think it's important, and this is where having a good working relationship with your veterinarian comes into play, is, if you're a serious hunter, your dog should have some anti-inflammatories that are prescribed just for them, to have on hand if needed. Just like us, having a little bit of soreness after a long day of hunting is pretty understandable. And I want my bird dog folks to have the option to reach for something that we know is safe and prescribed for their dog, and that they can utilize as needed, so that we're not having people trying to reach for human over-the-counter medications and making poor choices. So at the very start of hunting season, I think that's where it's most important. Is I love for my folks to get pre-hunting vet checks. We talk about, what are your plans for the hunting season? Where are you going? So we can talk about the risks of that area. And depending on where you're going, when it is, there are different risks that are really important and things that may need to be in your med bag versus other places you're not going to need them. So, my med bag in the truck is primarily those bigger, bulkier options, things that I'm bringing the dogs back to, really be dealt with and cared for. I also like to keep an e-collar in the truck. Or the cone of shame for people who don't know what an e-collar is.
Yeah, how do you say it? Elizabethan collar?
Elizabethan collars. Yep.
Yes. Yes.
So, I think those are really key for keeping dogs from licking at things, be that, sore pads that are, they might have a sore pad that's troubling them that evening, but if they can't lick it for 12 hours, they're good to go by the morning. But if they're allowed to lick it for 12 hours, then you have a dog that can't hunt for 3 days. I think they really do come into play. If you have a dog that gets quilled really badly and is not cooperating in regards to having that dealt with, I like to put a cone on those guys and then just start trucking somewhere so that they're not further breaking the quills off and pawing at their face and just and they will also try to rub the quills off on you. So that is where cones become very nice.
What about a light? I'm sorry. A light sedative? When you were having that discussion with the vet, would it make sense to have a light sedative if you have a dog that wouldn't necessarily sit still during that quill pulling process?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, if a dog is not going to sit for you for quilling, there's really not much that you can give it orally that's going to make it more cooperative. Okay. I think most of the options out there, the dogs can fight through. Now, I do think there are some things that certainly can calm dogs down for, easier things or maybe washing of a wound. My favorite is trazodone, which is an anti-anxiety medication and does seem to really slow them down. I give my own Spinoni some trazodone and a pain med prior to doing her grooming because she's not a huge fan of it. And that usually allows us to get through things. I think for a long time, a lot of veterinarians were using ACE routinely for a lot of different things. For the most part, that has fallen out of favor. And I do think in emergency situations where if a dog is truly injured, it can absolutely be dangerous. I think having some anti-anxiety med, there's certainly a good option. But the problem with anything oral is it's going to take a good 30 minutes for that to kick in. And so the likelihood of having to intervene prior to that or need help, depending on what the issue is, I think you have to kind of weigh that. So I think that's the biggest thing that I always like people to, consider is, how close are you to a veterinarian? For the most part, the sooner we see things, the less expensive it is for you. My folks who have sat on porcupine quills overnight or tried to pull a bunch and then sat on them overnight, by the time we get them the next day, then we're talking about lots of intervention and issues that are going on. So I think, it's do what you can do in the field, but also, be cognizant and know when it's time to ask for help. And I think when you go hunting, that's probably one of the most important things too, is to do your research ahead of time, that where is the closest veterinarian. Before I was a vet, I would actually try to find the veterinary hospital and get their phone number and put it in my phone for the region we were going to be hunting in. If you have a current exam with your veterinarian, your personal veterinarian, then oftentimes we can guide you over the phone, or we can even prescribe medications over the phone to a local pharmacy where you are near and hunting to. And again, that kind of circles back to that having a good working relationship with your veterinarian. But, if we haven't seen somebody in well over 6 months or a year, and then they're calling from, far eastern Montana where they're hunting and their dog is having a problem, it's hard for us to help. And in many cases, not legal for us to help. We can't prescribe medications if we don't have a current exam. So that's where I love to see all my dog folks get in, late August, beginning of September. Let's have that pre-hunt vet check. And then I know what they're doing when they call me, a couple weeks after that, and they're like, she's got diarrhea or she's got this lameness. If we don't have a medication in the bag already, oftentimes I can just call that into a pharmacy in town, and we can kind of work through things over the phone and via telemedicine, which is nice to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's a great option.
But as far as other things in the med bag, a good light. It always seems like dogs manage to hurt themselves right when the sun is setting. So
yes.
Headlamps are your friend. They're very, very helpful. I think, the biggest thing you can have, back at the truck is really a good dog. And this comes, back to even before we go hunting. The last place you want to realize that your dog doesn't like to have its face or its ears touched is after it got quilled by a porcupine. That's not
right.
The time to be training them of how you have to stand on the back of this tailgate and we're going to work on you. Cause it's not going to go well. And then it will probably never go well again. That's the sad thing is that I see a lot of dogs who come in with, a broken toenail, which is not a very big deal and something we can chat about, dealing with in the field as well. But, these dogs are having to be sedated and knocked out because they won't let anyone even touch their foot. It's real hard to put a bandage on your dog if it won't let you touch their foot. So you can have the best medical bag in the world, but if you have a dog that hasn't been trained to do any of those things, you're going to be stuck.
What else? Anything else in the kit in the truck?
I think the reason I like that fresh hydrogen peroxide is for getting things to vomit. So hydrogen peroxide does go bad. It is kind of like champagne that once you open it, the bubblies start to go away. So I like to have that there. Hydrogen peroxide is very good also for getting blood off of fur so you can even see what you're working with. Sometimes things are very obscured. It's hard to know where there is an injury, especially if, a dog that cuts its ear and then shakes its head and you have blood everywhere. I avoid cleaning wounds with hydrogen peroxide. It does hurt. It causes more damage. So, it's good to kind of get the initial blood away from the wound, but really after that, you want an actual wound disinfectant. So that would be something I'd also have in my bag as an actual wound cleaner. You can do some iodine and then dilute it. Water is just super important to have back at the truck, so you have things to wash a wound out with that you can do dilutions with, and clean something appropriately. I'd like to have nail trimmers in my pack back at the truck, and then a variety of tweezers, forceps, things that make things a little easier to hold. But I think those tend to get you a long ways. I like to have duct tape. I have duct tape in my truck
for everything.
Yep, and then. In my vest, I also have duct tape. So as far as, what do I actually carry in the field itself? I don't like to carry a lot of weight. We've already got enough things with us. I really try to travel light when I'm in the field. So the things that are attached to my hunting vest, I have a pair of forceps that are hemostats. So you can buy hemostats online, or you can buy hemostats at your local hackle shop or fly fishing shop. They will sell multitudes of them. And mine are literally clipped to my vest, so they never go missing. And that is what you pull quills with. And so those are probably the most important thing to have on your vest. And then the other thing I carry in my vest, and the heaviest item I carry in my vest, is a pair of wire nippers. So they make some fairly small ones that you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's that are very strong. And the idea with that is primarily the ability to cut barbed wire, in case you have a dog that gets entangled in wire, or sadly, primarily to cut a snare. So snares have extremely thick gauge wire. And it's very strong. So you really need to make sure that the nippers you buy are capable of going through a snare.
Is that possible with a smaller size?
It is. The pair I have, we actually had purchased for surgery for intramedullary pins for putting into dog bones. And so we didn't really like them for surgery that much, but I realized quickly that they could cut pins quite well, and pins are thicker than most snares are. So knock on wood, I have not had to actually test them in the field, but I think that they would do the job, and they certainly can go through barbed wire. So there are some good products out there now, so you're not having to carry a massive wire bolt cutter with you. These ones fit in my hunting vest pocket. And they just live there. And then the other things I have in my vest while I'm hunting is always water. A water bottle is important for you and important for the dogs, but for rinsing things off or rinsing things out, you can never carry enough water, which is why I'd rather have weight go towards that than something else. And then I carry a small roll of duct tape. And I carry a small flexi leash. And so the idea is, when you're in the field, you're really just, responding to the immediate emergency. So if that is plucking out some quills or bandaging something. So the way I bandage something in the field is I grab that duct tape, and then usually you've got gloves, you've got something, there's some extra fabric that you could come up with, be that a hat, a shirt, sleeve, something. You can use that to wrap around the wound, and then you can just wrap with duct tape until you get back to the truck. And that's my primary use for it. And the leash, the little flexible just the cheap leashes like you see in the vet clinics that we all use, the little just lassos that we put around your dog's neck. They're tiny, they pack well into vests, but you can use them as a muzzle. And so being able to put a leash muzzle on your dog, I think, is really important. There's lots of good videos out there of how to do that. I think, everyone's like, I would never need to muzzle my dog. They would never bite me. I guarantee you that everyone's dog can and will bite them if there was something painful enough, especially with quills. And so, the last thing you want is to get injured while you're trying to help your injured dog. And so I treat every dog that is in pain as a dog that would bite me. And I do have one dog in our family that ended up in a trap. She was in a leg hold trap in the water. She wandered into a muskrat trap. And my father, bless his heart, just bent down to take it off her paw. And he knew how to remove a trap easily and quickly. And she turned around and smacked him. And this is a dog who, well, today is now almost 16 years old. We've owned her a long time, but I think if you think that you're going to do anything potentially painful, especially remove something from a body part that is causing discomfort, toss a jacket, toss a vest, toss something over your dog's head before you just reach down to grab it, because it gets a lot harder to put a bandage on when you only have one hand that's working.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned that you put alcohol in your kit as well. What are you using the alcohol for?
So I will use alcohol to kind of clean around wound edges. Again, ideally I like to avoid the wound itself because I think that can be uncomfortable. For myself and my own background, I do carry full-on injectable anesthetics with me when I hunt. And so I have had to anesthetize some of our dogs while we're hunting, and then I will sterilely prep the skin to, do whatever we are needing to do.
Okay.
But I think for dogs, for people that don't have that ability, the biggest thing for alcohol is helping cool your dog down. So if you're worried about a dog having heat stroke, you pour alcohol on the pads of their feet and really get them cooled down a lot faster.
Interesting.
So I think for wound disinfection and then just cooling dogs down rapidly, that's where that alcohol can come in handy. If you're short on space, then I would say, primarily the hydrogen peroxide and then a good wound cleaner and saline are probably the more important things to have in the bag. You can probably skip on the alcohol.
Okay. I know for you, you might have a bag of fluids with you in a line in your truck.
Yep. I do.
When you're talking about overheating.
IV catheters and all of that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking for our average hunter, because having those sub-Q fluids are huge for a dog that's overheating.
Yep.
What do you think about that? Do you think they should go through training first? How to give that subcutaneous?
For myself, I would certainly say yes. I think that you certainly cause potentially a lot of damage, especially using the incorrect fluid, which there are fluids that can be purchased at ag stores as well. And I've had people who have done that, and they've put what we call a hypertonic solution under their dog's skin. And at the very least, their dog is going to slough the entire area where they put that fluid, so their skin will fall off.
Right.
And at the very worst, they can cause, huge metabolic issues and problems. So as far as heat stroke goes and just heat disease in general in dogs, I think the number one thing is avoid it. It's 100% avoidable disease. And, to not be too harsh, if it happens to your dog, it's 100% your fault. And so I think we have to take great responsibility with our hunting dogs because they will never stop. We have to ask them to stop. And that some dogs that can be very, very difficult. And I have had a couple that have run themselves close to heat stroke. But again, we probably made some additional poor choices that day. And so, being mindful of when you're hunting, how hot is it when you're hunting? And there are some days, even though we took off from work and we did all these things, that even once you're out there, you maybe actually shouldn't hunt. And that's hard. That takes a lot of, I think, self-control on our part to not pull the trigger on something we've planned for months. I think the access to water is huge. And when you're exploring new areas, that also can be hard because we don't know necessarily where water is. And if you're chasing upland birds, like I like to do, water is oftentimes quite scarce. And the water you do find may not be water that you actually want your dogs to drink. So I think that carrying of water, again, is very important. Having a hunt plan that maybe you're circling back to the truck a couple times. So you're doing different radiuses and you're always coming back to your truck, which is in the middle. looking at maps, asking people in the areas that you're hunting, water is the primary thing that will keep your dogs from having heat stroke. And also just making sure we're not working out on these days, that are 90 plus, which again, it can be hard sometimes depending on when you're hunting, especially early season hunting. But I think we have to be very cognizant of that. If you are concerned that your dog is developing, heat disease or stroke, the most important thing is to stop and to try to get that dog cooled off. And so that is, putting water on them, head to toe, getting alcohol onto their feet. But we also have to be really careful of not making them too cold. And so if we're really, thinking a dog is quickly developing heat stroke and worsening, again, that's where was that local veterinary hospital that we stopped and got the information from? Do we need to start going that direction?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can cause these dogs to actually go further into shock by cooling them down too much. Basically, their temperature sensor just stops working at that point.
Right.
So,
and I think that's the first reaction for a lot of people is get cold water on them, and they'll dump their cooler full of ice and freezing cold water onto the dog. So just water, like pond water, lake water, river water, something that isn't freezing cold.
Yeah. And, getting a fan on them, we have vehicles with air conditioning, getting them, cooled down, and really monitoring their temperature as we're doing this. And again, if we think we're at this point where we're having to wet these dogs down to that point and we're that worried, we are starting to talk about potential kidney disease and failure. And, we should be driving at that point. This is where hunting with a friend is nice. They can be working on your dog in the back as you're driving, and trying to get to somewhere where we can get these guys on IV fluids. But I think for milder ones, and how do you know if there's a mild case? These dogs will. It sometimes is very hard to make your dog stop and drink water and do anything because all they want to do is hunt. So again, that's where that training comes in of like when we stop and we sit, everybody stops and they sit. And you may not be able to force them to drink water, but we can at least get them to calm down and to cool down. And you can wet them down at that point so that they're taking a break and they're cooling down before we start again. And so, I think breaks are just key to keeping them nice and cool.
And what's your feeling when you're wetting them down, to go over top or get cool water on their bellies?
I just try to cool them down all over. I hunt my dogs in vests, which also I think is a very good thing from a safety standpoint. So I try to get the vest wet so it stays wet. The way that dogs cool themselves off is almost alien to us in trying to think about how do they cool down. Most of their cooling is through panting and what they're doing through their mouth. So I try to wet their faces down, their heads down, wet their feet down and their paws down, which is where they're losing most of their heat. But it does help to cool their entire body down as well, just surface area in general. So if they have a vest on, again, that helps them stay a little shaded and cooler longer. But the areas to focus on if you do happen to get to a creek is, get them in the water, get all 4 feet in the water, and most dogs, once they're at that point, they'll lay down and help cool themselves off.
Okay. Do we cover everything that was in the vest?
For me, that is primarily what I have. I don't put, a lot in there again. It's amazing what you can do with duct tape and a pair of gloves. I think you, again, can cover most things. If you need a splint or anything like that, there are sticks and things you can find out in the wilderness. And so, getting them back to the truck, is the main part. but you can get by primarily with just having, the wire cutters for the worst case scenario, hemostats for removing, again, seeds or sticks, water for washing things, and duct tape for binding it all back together.
Okay. And what about, and this is something that happened to us a couple of years ago. We were out hunting and a dog suffered. We later found out that this is a thing, hunting dog hypoglycemia.
Yeah, so my own dog had hunting dog hypoglycemia, my first setter, my Gordon setter. I will say it is rare. And so what it is basically a disease of dogs who just can't stop, can't stop, won't stop. And so they literally run themselves into being low blood sugar. And then if they do that far enough, they will actually have a seizure, which is what my Gordon used to do. And she was crazy. And she was very good at overexerting herself. And she was our first setter, and a different dog for us than what we had been used to. She ran a lot farther and was happier at bigger distances than we had been used to with our retrievers. So I think it was a learning curve for all. But it is, again, also a preventable disease. If you can get these dogs to stop, and these are also dogs, I try to give them a light snack. And I actually, with all of my hunting dogs, I do actually carry in my vest as well, some yummy treats, something for them to, just have a light snack. I don't feed them big meals, but when we have a break and I'm eating my cheese stick, they get a cheese stick, or they get, the biscuit I brought for them, with that idea of we're trying to keep their glucose levels up some. But yes, hunting dog hypoglycememia is very scary to see, because they'll have a full-blown seizure while you're hunting.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yep. And then, usually if you feed these kids some food and you take a break, then they're fine. And they're 100% normal otherwise. And so the good news about it is that it is a disease that usually is fleeting and very moment specific. They don't go on to then have more seizures. It's just when they are self-induced. As to why some dogs seem more prone to this than others, these are big hunting dogs, or not big in size, but just big in personality and running. They're hardworking dogs. But I think that all of us are suspicious that there might be something with their pancreas that causes them to utilize glucose incorrectly, and something within their body, or as far as they're doing something with their own insulin when they get to that level of exercise that's inappropriate. But I hunted for many, many years with my girl who had hunting dog hypoglycemia. And once we were kind of aware of what her limits were and made a point of taking breaks and eating snacks, it was really something that we didn't have to worry about anymore. And she didn't have more episodes unless we were silly and pushed it.
Right. And I've read to carry a little bit of sugar water for those dogs as well. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think for me, probably the more important thing is taking breaks and having snacks in general.
Okay.
If they've had an episode, that's where kind of sugar water comes in, because by then they're very depleted. But my goal would be that we avoid getting to that point at all. And so, I think having these dogs primarily just eat is the main thing. And so having something that has, again, I think cheese sticks work really well. And so you basically just keep these guys at a higher glucose level. I think for all hunting dogs in general, it is important to have breakfast. There were a lot of things out there for many, many years about not feeding dogs prior to working. And again, I think all of the studies are showing that that probably was not the best choice. So, my girls get breakfast. I make sure that that breakfast is, several hours before we're going to be working. But it makes sense that your glucose would tank if we weren't feeding you, which a lot of us were guilty of.
Right. And the hunting dog hypoglycemia, I've never seen a dog with EIC, the exercise induced collapse. So,
Mm-hmm.
does that look similar?
No, so EIC is primarily a Labrador problem as far as our hunting realm goes, though there are a few other breeds that are predisposed. Corgis are one as well. It is 100% genetic and very, you definitely will inherit it. If your parents have it, you're going to have it as well. So there are tests for EIC. Whereas hunting dog hypoglycemia is a metabolic derangement that is fleeting and self-induced. So not genetic. Dogs that are prone to hunting dog hypoglycemia do not seem to pass that trait on to their brethren. With the exception of, I think those dogs, again, are big running dogs. They're hard running dogs that tend to not pace themselves very well. And so that, I think, is a hunting trait that very well could get passed to future litters. And so you might kind of see it that way, but it's more of
and it's a trait that, a lot of people that enjoy hunting with that higher power, bigger running dog. It's tough. And that nails the exact characteristic of the dog that we had it happen to. But was that
the dogs
scary.
that are the can't stop, won't stop dogs. Those are the dogs that are going to do that. Whereas,
balls to the wall is what we call them.
Yep. Whereas EIC is actually a paralysis that also is fleeting, but it comes in, it's primarily usually the hind limbs, though it can drift upwards to affect the front limbs, and people will see it usually with retrievers. Again, the retrieving breeds seem to be more afflicted potentially, but they will be happy and normal, and then all of a sudden as they're retrieving or doing their sprints, they will start to be unable to use their hind legs, and then will literally be dragging themselves across the ground to get back to you with the tennis ball. It is not painful. The dogs are all immensely happy. Some of the videos you watch, the dogs just are grinning as they're still trying to get to you with the tennis ball. They almost seem unaware that their legs have failed them. And then the same thing, if you rest them, it seems to go away and improve. However, with that disease, again, it is absolutely genetic. We have a gene for that. It's a fairly easy disease to test for, though I will say also because of COVID-19, the lab is currently not running that test.
Oh no.
So, but it is something that you can screen dogs for before they are bred. And most of those dogs I don't feel can go on to have good hunting careers, because unfortunately it also kicks in very rapidly. So most dogs can only retrieve, maybe 20 times, and then it kicks in. So their ability to hunt is pretty low. It's something ideally, hopefully we'll be able to breed out, if we have enough breeders that really test for it.
Mm-hmm. What about the dogs that you're having a hard time getting to eat and drink while you're on a hunting trip? Like I know my male Bronco, even if I'm training him or if I'm conditioning him, he'll skip that next meal. And some dogs in general just don't like to eat when they travel because they're away from home, they're in a kennel, everything is different. And that just seems to wear on them so much more out in the field then.
Mm-hmm. And I have one that she's awful. My Lark, it doesn't matter if it's hunting season or not. Every day is a day that Lark and I have a conversation about eating and why it's important. And she just really has other things she'd rather be doing. And so, it, it can be very hard, and I don't have the silver bullet for that. For the dogs that it's a true struggle, and my own dog, she will literally make herself sick by choosing not to eat. It's a vicious cycle of she won't eat, so she gets GI upset and gets probably some little stomach ulcers, which then make her also not want to eat more, and round we go. So there are some products out there. And again, that's, where your veterinarians can come in. And I think it is good for people to have while hunting, some anti-nausea meds that are prescribed for their dogs. And there's a newer product actually called Entice, which is a drug that literally, tells the brain cells in your head that you have an appetite and you want to eat. And so for some of my hunting dogs, I have them on Entice when they go hunting, because they're just ridiculous about keeping themselves healthy. I also think when hunting, that is when, adding in some canned food, some chicken, some broth, maybe some cheese on their food. I baby my bird dogs, and I think that's just fine. And people should not feel bad about spoiling or babying their bird dogs. They work hard for us. So, giving them a little top dressing to encourage them to eat, I think is completely safe and a good thing to do for mini dogs.
And I gotta put a plug in here for Purina, because their Fortiflora, the probiotic, putting that just right over the dry kibble does amazing things for their appetite.
Yep. I have a lot of dogs that really enjoy Fortiflora, and the smell of it, and it will increase their want and drive to eat. They have a new product out now too that's a calming Fortiflora for
the
our
calming
dogs
care.
that are stressors. And so I have had a lot of dogs respond to that as well. So I think it is a do what you can do, don't do what you can't. This is also, prior to hunting season, I actually like to over condition my dogs just a little bit. I don't want, chunky monkeys out in the field, but I think that for most people, especially if they have lean breeds, such as setters or pointers, or, German short hairs, or dogs that just, they know run through calories in the hunting season, and get to skin and bones. Those are dogs that we really would like to see, go into the hunting season, maybe about 2 to 3 pounds over what their ideal weight is, because we know they're going to burn through that. And it allows us to have a reserve, so that these dogs are not coming out of the hunting season looking like, skeletons, because that's not healthy for them either. And then heaven forbid, if they do get sick or they have a severe injury and they're down to a body condition score of 2, that is when actually nutrition becomes a huge thing, of these dogs have no reserves, nothing to work from. And now, maybe they're off their food for a few days. That can snowball very, very rapidly. So I think, food is something that is important, for our dogs, but their body condition entirely is something that's really important to focus on. I've got a lot of fat dogs out there. I would say probably most of my patients are more overweight than anything else, but I do have that group of dogs that are going to be too thin. And those dogs we need to focus on a little bit better. And so prior to hunting season, I like to transition both my own girls and my skinnier hunting dog clients over to a higher protein, higher fat diet. And so, my girls eat pro plan and they're on the sporting performance diet during the season, they do not eat that year round. Most dogs don't need to eat that level of calories and fat and protein year round. They can go down to a normal diet in the off season.
What about the senior dogs that don't really understand that their own limitations? How much should we be hunting them, and should we be giving them a pain med before they go out and when they get done? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, from someone who currently owns a 16-year-old who overdid it yesterday, and after this podcast, I'm actually going to go and check on her. I think it's for all dogs, really. Most dogs, I feel, will overdo it. Again, we've got to be the humans and the brains of the operation and remind things when they need to stop. But, for my older dogs, I really encourage people to go on joint diets, just long term. I think that they're incredibly helpful for these guys of actually keeping them off of meds for longer. And then I do think, it's a rare senior dog who does not need some anti-inflammatories in its life or wouldn't benefit from having some anti-inflammatories in its life. And so, as with people, preventing injury is always more important than reacting to an injury. And so I pre-med my older dogs with an anti-inflammatory before they go out in the field. I think waiting to watch them be sore and stiff is silly. And a lot of us are resistant to medications. We don't like our dogs on medications, but we know they're going to be sore and stiff. And if we gave them their anti-inflammatory before they went out and hunted, odds are that stiffness would be much lower, or they could recover and then hunt the next day. So, and senior, it varies. I've got some dogs that are still hunting out there that are 12, 14-year-old dogs. It's really amazing when I work with sled dogs. The average age of some of the dogs in the Iditarod, which is a 1,000-mile race, is double digits. These are 10-year-old dogs that run 1,000 miles and have run that race 6 or 7 times in their life.
That's awesome. Wow.
And I think that sometimes we really focus on what a number is and not what our dog can do. But that also goes the same way of just because we have a young dog. There are a lot of young dogs that, because of injury or growth or breeding or what have you, have lamenesses that flare up every year when they're hunting. And just because they're young also doesn't mean that they shouldn't have an anti-inflammatory before they go out.
Okay.
If we know they're going to be sore, they should have a pre-med on board.
Okay. Let's see. You covered, when we're out in the field, you covered the lacerations, traps. What about a ripped or split toenail?
Mm-hmm. So I think the most important thing is making sure our nails are trimmed before we go hunting. The number one reason a nail gets torn or broken is because their nails are too long. And we haven't been trimming them enough. So the quicks, which is kind of the blood vessel within the nail, it grows along with the nail. So if our dogs are not having nail trims or they're not running their nails down, which some dogs will do, that quick is also going to get long. And so that limits how short we can trim those nails. So I think keeping up on your nail trims, number one, so that we have dogs that have nice short nails, is the best way to avoid it. So if that hasn't happened, or we end up with a dog with a broken toenail, the way that it's dealt with, if it's really loose and flapping in the wind, it's kind of like a glorified hangnail. The reason it hurts is because it's twisted off to the side and they're catching it when they step on something. So the way we remove it, and the way we remove it in the clinic, is I personally try to numb that area. I'll put some numbing solution on it, or I'll put the dog's paw in some ice water and kind of numb their paw up, which is something that people can do at home too. And then you take your pair of hemostats and quick like a rabbit, you grab that nail and you just pull.
Ooh.
And it sounds a little brutal.
Ouch.
But
And put
most of these
muzzle
nails,
on, maybe?
yep, that's exactly, yep. Most of these nails are extremely loose. And you can tell, they're hanging off at a 45-degree angle or 90-degree angle. Those nails are not attached anymore. And so they amazingly they just come right off. It's actually fairly not that painful for the dogs. It's a quick pinch. And then most nails are going to bleed a little bit. And so having, again, that handy dandy bandage that you've practiced doing and your dog is good about having their paws handled, you can put that on. I plan here in a couple of days, hopefully having a video about how to trim your dog's nails at home so that people can, do a little better job of that and hopefully just avoid the injury to begin with.
Do you clip or do you Dremel?
I am a clipper. I don't have the patience for dremeling.
Okay.
And I really don't think that one is better than another. Clipping leaves a little bit of a sharper edge. I think they run that down to a nice rounded edge within a day or two. I don't see much of a difference with my own dogs. I have a lot of people who love dremeling because the nails are then nice and round right from the beginning. I think that dremeling actually, there's a misnomer with it that it is safer or you are less likely to quick a dog. Those things are probably true as far as the less likely to quick a dog. But it certainly can be painful. And I have watched many dogs have their nails dremeled, I think, inappropriately. So, as ladies, if you've ever gotten your nails done, and they've had to Dremel part of your nail, the main thing is heat. And so, if anyone has had that done, I know myself, I've had some very painful dremeling experiences. And so dogs can have their nails burned by the Dremel, especially if you're concentrating on one nail and just focusing on that one nail and not going back and forth like you're supposed to. If the dog is starting to jerk its paw away, I think that a lot of times people think that the dog is just not wanting to be held. But I watch these dogs and I think a lot of it is actually because the dremeling is uncomfortable and hurting them. So I think you can use a Dremel appropriately. But I think that's the biggest thing is that you can overheat that nail very easily. And people need to be careful about that. And I think you can also Dremel them a little too short. You can also trim your dog's nails a little too short prior to hunting, which I have done with my own dog. And then we went and chased, Sharpies in some pretty sandy ground, and she ran her feet down to the quicks because there wasn't much nail between the quicks and the ground, and so then she was bleeding from all four paws or all four nails. So there's a limit to everything.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on boots? Like you were talking earlier about paws being sore and now with the nail thing. So what do you think about boots when they're hunting?
I think that boots are great. And most dogs, I feel if you train them appropriately, will not need them. If you know that you haven't gotten out or your dog has only been out, but it's been on grassy fields and you're going to go again, chase Sharpies or Huns or quail down in Arizona, I guarantee you your dog's feet are not going to hold up for that. So the difference of surfaces of where you're going to go hunting, I think is what should make you start thinking about boots or not. So my girls wear boots when we chase quail in the Southwest. They have huge fun cactuses that can happen down there and cholla and all sorts of things. But it's sand and I live in the Bitterroot Valley. My girls do not walk around on sand. And so any calluses they have quickly get polished off and you can hurt your dog's feet real fast. And the sand is hot, which also causes more damage. When we chase pheasants in eastern Montana, they don't wear boots. So, I think if a dog does well in boots or is prone to having sore, soft pads, which I think certain colors of dogs as well as certain breeds do, of my two setters, my red and white, has much softer pads than my tricolour. And I think that my red-headed dogs in general, my white dogs, tend to have softer pads than some of the other dogs out there. So those are all things to kind of, think about. But there's lots of good boots out there. I think the likelihood of losing boots is high. So I tell people don't go overboard in buying expensive boots just because you are probably going to lose one. If you're hunting in the snow, you're starting to do some grouse or ptarmigan hunting where you're actually up and in some snow country. That's another place I think boots can really come into play. Or you're just, doing some cross-country skiing in the winter. I'll put a pair of boots on my girls when I do that.
Okay. And boots, I feel like there's so many different ones on the market. And I don't necessarily want to, endorse one company over another, but is there any like specific boot that you're like, this is the best on the market that I know of?
I don't have one in particular. There are certainly some good ones out there ranging from Kurgo to Roughwear, that have come out with probably a little more expensive one with Vibram soles and all sorts of fanciness.
Oh boy.
I think, again, kind of depending on where you're going and what you're doing, that's where you kind of choose, what boot you have. For down in the Southwest, most of us who boot up down there use really heavy duty rubber boots, or actually the inner tubes from bikes to create and make your own boot. The spines on things down there are intense, and so most over-the-counter boots are just not going to cut it. You usually have to do a combination of a do-it-yourself. Duct tape, again, is your friend.
Okay. And speaking about feet here, cheatgrass.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you're seeing a lot of that. I saw you do a Instagram post recently with all the cheatgrass that's going on right now.
Yeah. It's horrible stuff. It really is. And, again, it's probably the number one is avoid it if you can. And if you can't, you at the end of every hike, you've got to look for this stuff. Looking for it after it causes a bump is way too long. And so, every day, if my girls happen to wander in a field and I know there's some cheatgrass there, their feet get checked every day. And so actually, as I'm talking to you here, I'm feeling Zara's toes and just pulled out a cheatgrass from between her toes. So
did you really?
I did. And most of us, if you check your dog's toes, you can probably find some cheatgrass in there, especially in the bitterroot. So it's, knowing what it looks like, knowing what the plant is, where you're going to find it. Most of this is going to be along trail edges. It's in disturbed ground. It's right when you get out of the truck at the trailhead, that's where your dog is going to get into it. You might not have any once you're on the trail, but I've had a lot of dogs, people haven't even started hiking yet, and they manage to, get cheatgrass down their ear or a bunch of cheatgrass in their feet. So, actually I'm on cheatgrass number 2 here of working on Zara's toes. So,
of course. But I've heard
where, really working with your dog's feet is important here too.
Right.
There's a lot of dogs out there that have to be held down to have anyone look at their toes. And that's just, it's just not okay for a bird dog. They can't be allowed to feel that way.
And unfortunately, I was told Chucker really liked to eat cheatgrass. So that's...
Yeah, I think there's certainly some birds that enjoy it. But, I think they enjoy our native species more. And so that's where, I think it's important for all of us to do our part. If it's on your property, you need to try to get rid of it, and, support the groups that, try to get rid of it as an organization, so Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, all of those folks try to really get out there and do some cheatgrass work and fight these invasive grass species over our native grass species that are so important.
What about being sprayed by a skunk?
Yeah, there's certain things I think, porcupines and skunks, if you have a retriever or a dual purpose dog, I feel you have a destiny with both of those creatures. So just be prepared. It's going to happen. If you have, one of the pointers or the setters, you might actually get away with not having an interaction with those. Again, knock on wood, my setters love to point porcupines. The weirder the creature in the woods, the more likely they're going to point it, which is great. But if you have a spaniel, that they're going to end that porcupine or think they're going to end that porcupine. But, so for skunks, luckily they can't do any, usually don't cause a lot of serious damage to your dog. I will say that they can, and I have had one dog who had severe damage to its corneas and it was a spaniel, who got up very close and personal and caught the skunk, and the skunk sprayed him at, zero distance right on the face. And so the spray that they have is very corrosive and acidic, and he got a great deal of that directly on his eyes. And unfortunately, his eyes were not rinsed out quickly. So if your dog does get sprayed in the face, that's where that saline bottle and or water bottle, if it's happening in your way out in the field, come into play. And so just like with a human, if you got something toxic in your eyes and they send you over to the eye wash station, that's what you're doing with your dog. So, pouring a lot of water in both of their eyes with their, holding their eyes open, taking saline, rinsing their eyes out copiously, trying to get that stuff out. And that's, the biggest worry we have for skunks. After that, as far as removing the smell, there are numerous concoctions out there. And I think all of them work to some extent. None of them work 100%.
Especially when they get wet. Every time they get wet, they start stinking anyways.
Yes, exactly. Hydrogen peroxide poured on the dog, avoiding their eyes, does seem to help decrease some of that, so I like Dawn soap. I would say that is also something that I would probably have in my kit in the truck. It's good at breaking down grease and just removing things. So copiously washing them is the main things. There are some skunk off shampoos. I think they work okay. But anything you use, it's going to take some time.
Okay. And there is a mixture that we've used several times. It's hydrogen peroxide, Dawn dish soap, and baking soda.
Yep.
It seems like that trio does pretty good, but the key to that is to not let the dog get wet before you put that on, because if the dog gets wet first, then it's game over and you're never going to put it out.
It spreads all over. Yep.
Yeah. And it comes back often every time they get wet. So if we were putting together a first aid kit, like I've seen different places sell them for, it's like $500 or more.
Yeah.
What's your intake on that?
Yeah. In my future life, I would actually love to create, I think, a good, just a sporting dog, field kit. That's one of my goals, to someday maybe be able to create that and market that. But in the meantime, until that comes out, I think that the best thing for people is primarily to make one for themselves. And again, I think this broadcast is primarily kind of geared for a lot of us lady hunters. And, what I have found works really well for my dogs and my kits that I use is I either have like a makeup bag. One of the bigger ones is what I use oftentimes for my kits because it has lots of little storage cubicles that I can easily use and kind of load up sections. But I think everyone's dog is also so different and their needs are so different. And so a lot of these over-the-counter kits that you buy they're expensive, and then you're still finding they don't have what you need. Everything's individually wrapped in little pieces of paper, and when you're working in an emergency, the last thing you want is 10 individually packaged pieces of gauze. It gets you really frustrated very rapidly, and so you want things to have a kit that you're familiar with that has lots of separate compartments so that you can keep everything that's clean and dry. I like mine to be bright, and my current kit is actually in a little bit of it doubles as a backpack, so that I can take that kit from my truck if I can't get something out of the field, and I can quickly and easily carry that over my shoulder and get into the field. So I think that making your own tends to be less expensive for most people, and it's going to be more in line with the needs that you have for your dogs.
Perfect. And that's what this episode is all about. Making your own first aid kits. Because we can do it without spending $500.
You absolutely can and should.
Yeah.
Unless that kit comes with a doctor that they packed in it. I don't think there's any reason to be spending $500. There's lots of, lots of places to get things. I don't buy stuff in the human aisle of Walmart or your local store. It's going to be far more expensive. Visit your ag stores in town. Lyon County Supply has some, really nice staplers you can buy. There's lots of options out there.
Okay. Excellent. Inducing vomiting. So you had talked earlier about the hydrogen peroxide. And what about using salt as another option too?
Yeah. So, of the two, hydrogen peroxide would be the one I would go to. Salt was something that we used, long ago. And, if you were trapped somewhere in a cabin 5,000 miles from anywhere, you didn't have any hydrogen peroxide, but you had some table salt, I'd probably use it.
Okay.
But salt can definitely, we feel, cause some pretty extreme derangements, and its effectiveness is very variable. Whereas hydrogen peroxide, if used correctly, has upwards of a 95% success rate. So the way that it should be used is know why we're causing something to vomit. Does it need to vomit? If you are in doubt, because there are so many things out there that dogs can eat that you just don't know, from plants to medications to all sorts of things. Your veterinarian is always, willing to help, but there also is the ASPCA 1-800-POISON line. And honestly, we oftentimes call that as veterinarians because I can't keep up on everything, of what a dog ate out of somebody's purse. I can't know everything in regards to what's toxic, what's not, what's benign. And so they are wonderful. They have taken calls from, on everything. It seems like I've yet to call them and have them say they have not, they don't know if it's dangerous or not, but, it is open for non-medical professionals as well. So you can call them, tell them what they ate, how much, when, and they will let you know if vomiting is an appropriate response. But the way you get these guys to vomit is you want to use 3% hydrogen peroxide, which is your basic hydrogen peroxide you would buy at the store. But there are stronger kinds out there, which are extremely dangerous, and you do not want to use them. And it's basically 1 ml per pound of dog, with a limit of about 40 to 45 mils total. So that's where having a large syringe in your kit is a good idea, so that you can adequately measure what a mill is. It helps to feed them a small amount of food prior to trying to get them to vomit. So if they just snarfled up something we knew was dangerous, like a bunch of rat bait, then ideally you'd feed them some canned food or some bread, something that's a little kind of absorbing. And then you give the hydrogen peroxide. You want to give it orally. You want to give it all kind of together and at once. You do not want to mix it into food. It does not work if you mix it in something. It has to go into the dog's mouth. And most dogs are going to vomit pretty rapidly. If they haven't, if about 10 minutes has gone by, 10 to 15 minutes, it can be repeated once. There is a small group of dogs that it's not going to work on. And again, this is something that, if you are in town and a veterinarian is a short drive away, ideally the veterinary team would be doing this so that they could do follow-up. We usually have some injectables that we use instead for inducing vomiting that are almost 100% effective, apomorphine. And so that's what we like to use. But if you are in a bind and far from veterinary care, we know they ate something harmful, we know that it's something that can be vomited back up, so we would like them to vomit it up.
What's the time limit for that? Like, if you were away from home for 2 hours, you don't know. It could have happened. Yeah.
Could have happened anytime, so
right.
Ideally within 30 to 60 minutes of ingesting something.
Okay.
If it's really bad, you walked in and, again, you're far from a veterinarian, the dog ate, a lot of dark chocolate, or again, rat bait tends to be the big one that comes to mind. Then yes, if I'd been gone 2 hours, but somewhere in the 2 hours that happened, I don't know when it was, I would probably still give the hydrogen peroxide, in the hopes of getting some of that back out. But again, if we're causing something to vomit, yes, it's fine, get our vomiting done, but we're still going to a veterinarian after that. I've had numerous people who watched a dog eat rat bait, got it to vomit, thought it vomited, the majority of the rat bait up, and thought they were good. And then their dogs came in with retinoside toxicity a week later. So it's important to double check these things. That's why we're here. We want to help people out. Don't be afraid to come in. Again, I think that's the biggest thing of, yes, there's some fees with veterinary medicine. I 100% understand that, but it is always less expensive the sooner you come in. The longer you wait, the bigger the problems are going to be.
What about things that we shouldn't be inducing them to vomit back up?
So, that's where that 1-800-ASPCA phone number is really useful, because they can let you know. But in general, things that are corrosive or things that are potentially dangerous to come back up. So you just watched your dog hoover down a fish that also had a treble hook in it. You probably don't want them to vomit that back up. Having a fish hook in your stomach is a much easier place for us to work with it than having a fish hook in your esophagus. That's a really bad place to have a fish hook. So any oils, batteries, things, acids, some detergents, things like that, those are not good things to have come back up.
Oh man, I'm so glad I don't have dogs that eat batteries. Knock on wood.
You don't own Labradors.
Just when I say it. I know, right?
Oh, Labradors.
Okay, so
God
what's
love 'em.
the Labradorks?
Yeah,
they're the best.
they do make poor choices.
It's only out of love, though. Everything a Labrador does, it's out of pure love and enjoyment for life. So can you tell the listeners about your new endeavor that you're working on right now?
So my hope and things I'm working towards right now is to actually have a dog specific, but primarily sporting dog specific practice. I think that that would be a really exciting venture for me, and just I enjoy working with athletes, and I think that would be a great thing for a lot of the hunting groups here in the Valley to have that option. And to do that, I'm pursuing my rehabilitation and therapy license as well. So I'm on my way to getting that. And then I also am designing some sport dog gear. So hopefully by next year I'll have some additional safety options for people, because I've been kind of disappointed with some of the things that are out there for people to purchase for their dogs. So hopefully there'll be some new things out there to help keep your dogs safe in the field, maybe by next hunting season.
Does that align with like dog boots?
Boots won't be on my first go. My main thing
that seems like a pretty tough endeavor.
It is. I think that the main thing I would like to see is a better vest for sporting dogs. I think that the options out there are inadequate, and they do not hold up, and they don't prevent or cover the areas that really actually need to be covered up and kept safe. So that's my hope, is that I'll have something out here to share with people hopefully by next year.
That's very cool. Dr. Meg, where can we find you on Instagram, website? Where are you all at?
So I'm primarily right now on Instagram, on Point Vet, and hopefully eventually here I'll maybe get a blog started. But the Instagram site right now has links to videos about how to care for your hunting dogs, and just posts in general about different injuries, and then lots of pictures of cute setters, just because I can.
I love it. No, you have a great Instagram page for people to learn from. It's good stuff there. Yeah, and of course I appreciate a vet that is out there with their bird dogs getting it done. So pretty cool.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on today and sharing your knowledge with us, because it has been a widely popular topic that people want to hear about, and you did an amazing job at it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to do so.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Bird Dog Babe podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and learned something from the content, please share it with your friends. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on whichever platform you're listening from. Check out the show notes for links to references from this episode, as well as info on how to connect through Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you're loving this podcast and want to support the production and content, please consider becoming one of my Patreon patrons. Being a patron connects us more on a personal level, where I'm able to help answer questions and give advice. My husband William and I have bred, owned, and trained AKC Master Hunters, Field Champions, NAVDA VCs, and AKC Show Champions. We're excited to not only share what we've learned, but also listen from previous and future episode guests for additional content. Go to patreon.com/thebirddogbabe and $5 per month and you're in. And as always, 2% goes to conservation. Until next week, bird dog babes, keep them versatile.